everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Defining the Dash podcast. Thank you so much for tuning back in with us and joining us. We appreciate you stopping by on your busy day, and we sure hope to be a help to you today. And actually, that, Brother Mark, is exactly what we wanted to talk about, is help, isn't it?
That's what it looks like on my agenda.
That's Brother Mark, the voice of reason, the voice of logic.
Here I am.
And so, Brother Mark, it was probably been a couple months now. It's been on my mind and I guess on my heart about, it seems that we and these next couple episodes are probably going to be a little bit more transparent than normally. And that don't mean I'm identifying as a parent. I am a parent. But I'm going to be more clear and let you have a clear view into my physical.
Is that because you lost weight?
Yeah.
That's a weight loss joke.
It's a weight loss joke.
Yeah. Okay.
I no longer have to use the double doors at the side of the church.
That's awesome, man. Must be nice.
Yeah.
I
have to use the garage door, just raise the door. But it seems like a lot of times we as church people have a hard time asking for help.
Sure.
And especially as men, it seems like, and I'm not saying that you ladies, have it any easier by any means. But I know as men and as the man of the house, when I need help with something, or if it's something that I'm, if I'm having a hard time coming up with finances, or if I'm needing help with something, if I'm lifting something or just if, it's hard to ask somebody, hey, will you come and help me do this? Or will you help me do this?
Mm-hmm.
And it carries over into our spiritual life. Sometimes it's hard to say, hey, man, I'm hurting.
Right.
Or maybe I've had this family member backslide. Mm-hmm. Or, maybe somebody in your family's going through a divorce or their home's in a wreck, and you feel embarrassed to even talk about it, or it's so painful that you don't know how to talk about it. But there's multiple scenarios there that it seems like, and we'll probably split this up maybe into a 2-part episode, because there's of course spiritual needs and spiritual help that we need,
right?
And then there's also at times financial and physical needs, and if we could talk all day on all this.
Sure.
And so it's we may just split this up here into 2 episodes and talk about this, but we want to talk today on just, Lord, I need some help.
Okay.
And I think we've all been there, don't you?
I've been there.
Yeah,
I've been there a few times,
and
more than a few actually.
Seems like I stay there.
I don't know if every time I'm not there.
Yes, it's like one of them things where it's like, well, what did he? It's like having spaghetti. You're cooking spaghetti and it just goes splattering out of the pot.
Oh yeah,
yeah. And you're like, instead of saying what did it get on, it's easier questions. What did it not?
What do I not have to clean?
Yeah, what do I not have to clean? So it's more like that. When did I not need help?
Exactly.
Would be much easier to discuss than when I did. But yes, there are so many times, and we all have lost loved ones, and but sometimes, it's hard to talk about.
Sure.
And sometimes, their situations are in such a way that maybe it's painful to talk about, or maybe it's just, you just really have a hard time putting it into words. Mm-hmm. Right now, I'm having a hard time even putting it into words, just trying to describe, possible scenarios. But the burden of my heart is basically to tell you it's okay.
Right.
We all need help. The Bible tells us we're to help bear one another's burdens. Mm-hmm. And how can we do that if we don't know when our brother's hurting or when our brother's going through something?
Right.
And so that's kind of what we want to talk about today. That's just scraping the top of it off. Mm-hmm. Brother Mark, what you got to add so far?
You know, I was just listening to you talk and about the need to know. Someone has to know that there's a need before they can try to help with that need.
Mm-hmm.
And my mind just goes, I think it's just because I got 4 kids running around the house. Well, one kid being carried around the house. He's 4.
A little closer
He's 4 months old, so he's not really running around the house yet, but he's being carried around the house. And so I got a kid being carried around the house, and 3 kids running around the house, literally sometimes. And my mind just goes back to my 3-year-old son, and when he found out where the Band-Aids were, man, it was on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so he's figured out how to get into the cabinets, and he knows where the Band-Aids are. He knows how to open up a Band-Aid, and he knows where to put it right where it hurts. But if he's just playing doctor, or if there really is somebody with a scratch on their leg, he don't know where to. He can't even begin to open a Band-Aid and think about where to put that at unless he knows there's a boo-boo somewhere.
Right. That's exactly right. You can't mend something that you don't know is broke.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so, and not that we can mend it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you need $5, I might can mend that hurt for you
on payday. Yeah.
On payday.
Not today. Rain check. Whatever that means.
I will heal your hurt
in a few days.
In a month when I get paid next month. But there's a lot of hurts that we can't do.
Right.
That we can't help.
Right.
We might can hear you out, but we can take it to God in prayer for you and on your behalf and with you.
Right. Right.
So that's the key. It's like when we started these podcasts. We don't have all the answers, but we know where we can get the answer.
Right.
We can go to God's word and we can go to God, and that's where we're going to find our help, and that's where we're going to find our answers.
Right.
And Psalms 18:6 says, "In my distress I called upon the Lord and cried unto my God." I always love that when it says my God.
Uh-huh.
He heard my voice out of his temple, and my cry came before him, even into his ears.
Wow.
So God heard our cries. And I was telling someone today, actually, and this, of course, goes into a more along the financial side, but and we'll go into this in a little bit more, maybe on the next episode if we discuss the financial and physical aspects of needing help. But there was times in my life when I was like, I need this X amount of dollars. And I don't know where it's going to come from. And, our bank account's dry and blah, 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 and, someone, you'd go get the mail and there would be a check in the mail for that exact amount. God already had somebody mail that 5-6 days before that need ever even came.
Yeah. Before you knew about it.
Before I even knew about it. Yeah. And so, we can, depend upon him to provide for our needs. And so I don't want you to feel like you're somebody that's without hope.
Right.
Or feel like somebody that's without help.
Right.
Because we do have help and we do have hope in this day and time.
Yeah. You was talking about how someone had mailed that check a few days before you knew you had a need. God already knew you had your need coming up. And I was thinking about my own personal life, Brother Chad, and there's been times when I thought I was at the end of my rope, and later on I'd figure out my rope was a little bit longer because I'd go a little further down the rope. It's kind of like the trial of your life, when you first break up with your first girlfriend, and you're like, man, don't get any worse than this, and you just lived a couple of days or a year or two longer, and it gets a lot worse. Oh yeah, sometimes, man. And so, but I remember being in church at some point in the last few years, and man, just going through the grind like everybody does. It's kind of weird if someone doesn't go through the grind sometimes.
Yeah.
That's part of life experience, I reckon. And man, we were just going through it, and one of my favorite preachers of all time, Brother John Gabbard.
Oh yes.
And, it was one of those kind of things, that I guess I was getting to the place where I was just kind of doubting everything. I mean, not everything, but a lot of things, I mean, I still knew the color blue was blue because that's what I was told, so I didn't doubt that. But there's something, just struggling with stuff. And I thought, man, Brother Gabber's coming to town. Maybe he's got a word from the Lord. Maybe he's got something to say. I was just kind of getting down that rope again. And man, he came there at night, and I hope I never forget this, but he would get up to preach. Mm-hmm. And that night he had come with an interest and a burden in preaching something in particular before he even got to us. And then when he got to us that night, I think it was that night in church, he said, "Fellow, the Lord sent him another direction." But what I thought was awesome about that is the direction that the Lord had sent him that night was exactly what I needed to hear.
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
Now, I don't know what everybody else was doing that night. I don't know. I don't know what my wife was thinking that night. I don't know what the people behind us or in front of us was thinking that night. But man, I just cried all the way through that message because I knew, man, God cared enough about me that hours or days before this message even come forward, that God knew exactly what I needed to hear.
Yes, sir.
But Brother Chad, you're talking about that, talking about being in your distress, you called upon the Lord. I feel like I probably would not have received any help or nowhere near as much help that night, and other examples I could give, unless I recognized that I was in distress.
Absolutely.
And
that's the key.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we don't want to admit that.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is, what I was talking about a while ago, all those scenarios, whether it's lost loved one, a backslider, if it's financial need, a physical need, it's almost like you want to hide everything. You want to sweep it under the rug, like it's an embarrassment to admit that there's an issue.
Right.
And again, maybe in this next, in this episode or the next one, I'll probably have to open up and explain some of that in my own life. Mm-hmm. And as to why I'm saying that, because I have been there.
Yeah.
I have been there on multiple occasions.
Sure.
And I have lost loved ones. I have loved ones that the sin in their life has been, maybe hard to talk about. The situations that arise from that. I've faced those financial uncertainties, those problems, and you didn't know where your next penny was coming from and how you was going to feed your babies. And a lot of times when people are facing this, they turn in the wrong direction.
Right.
They feel, I guess, in a way, so weakened by their situation that a lot of times that they turn to they just turn to whatever, I mean, there's times when people will turn away to, they'll leave church over these situations because they really don't know how to address it.
Right.
And they don't want to, because they don't know how to address it, they're afraid to really talk about it to anybody, and they're afraid the questions will come up, and they'll leave church, or they'll do something else, or go to a different church where people maybe don't know the situation. They'll if it's a financial issue, maybe they'll miss church for a while because they're embarrassed to admit they don't have the gas money to get to church or whatever. And I've been there. I've been to that point to where I've said, I really don't know how we're going to get to church tonight.
Right.
And a lot of times when I went ahead and pushed and made it to church that night, one, God met us there with a spiritual encouragement that there was usually somebody that met us with a holiness handshake, as we call them.
Man, it's awesome.
And that would help us to get on through.
Yeah.
But, if a situation arises where we do need help, if there's someone in your church that you truly count on and that you have faith in, there's no harm in saying, "Hey, I just want you to know I'm really going through it right now.
Right.
Would you mind when you pray just to say a prayer for me? I'm struggling. You can say I'm struggling financially. I'm struggling physically. I'm struggling spiritually. I've got this loved one who's struggling spiritually, and it's really causing me some problems, and I just need God to move. And there's no harm in that. There's no
Right.
shame in that. We can only carry so big a load.
Right.
When I was in the coal mines, we would drive what they call shuttle cars. They were electric cars. They were you had 1,000 foot of cable on the back of that car, and so, but we were driving what they call 21s. Now these 21s, I believe, were meant to haul like 5 ton of coal or something on them if you just graveyard hump it a little bit and not overload it. I think it was 5 ton, and we were hauling like 9 and 10 ton on those. And what would happen? You would hit a spot in the floor of the mine, in the bottom, maybe a hole, and the whole wheel unit would break off because that car was not meant to carry that load.
Right.
And eventually it did it. It may have done it for a time or two, but eventually it gave in to the pressure of the load that it was under.
Right.
Now, how can we expect our lives to be any different than that?
Right.
They eventually upgraded to number 10 cars, which could carry a much greater load. And we stopped snapping off wheel units,
Right.
But, because more load was able to be carried. Okay. 2 people can carry a heavier load than 1.
Sure.
So why not let your brother help you carry some of that load if you can?
Right.
Because there's going to come a day your brother's going to need you to help carry a load.
Absolutely.
And because we're all in this together. And so I just want to try to make it clear that, don't be afraid to say I need some help.
Right.
There's no shame. There's no embarrassment. There's no, there's no dishonor in doing that.
Right. I was thinking about, asking people for help. And as a man, from a man's perspective, I've never been a woman. I've never identified as a woman.
We'll just have to take their word for it, won't we?
Right, exactly. I've never even played a woman in a Christmas play. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know anything about women. I know, but anyway. So, but from a man's perspective, I feel like society, we've created this atmosphere in society where it's almost like if a man asks for help, and we may do it to ourselves. It may not be society that does it to us. It may do it to ourselves, but it's almost like if we ask for help, it almost like it works against our manhood, our manliness.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? But the reality,
it shows a weakness.
Yeah. But the reality of it is that I have noticed is that transparency, even in weakness, makes you more of a man.
Yeah. It'll make and in the long run, it'll make you stronger.
It'll make you strong in the long run. And so denial in the short term, it seems to be a coping mechanism people use. But the reality of it is a lot of times denial, when a man or woman's under pressure and they just deny it and keep on ignoring it, then, what will end up happening is you'll suffer in multiple realms of life. You'll suffer spiritually. You will suffer physically. Your blood pressure will go up. Your hair is going to fall out. You're not going to sleep good at night. You're going to have
me or you, neither one can afford to lose any more. Oh,
man, I'm out.
So we're going to be knocking on everybody's door.
Exactly. Can't do this no more, man.
Yeah.
But you're going to suffer. You'll get to work, and you may not get that promotion because you can't really focus on your job because you're stressed out and you carry things. And so, it affects multiple realms of life. Simple denial.
Yeah.
Versus transparency, where you can get some help over whatever the dilemma is, and let somebody come up, stand by your side and walk with you through it. Yes. You'll get further down the road that way.
Yes, and we've all had to call on somebody at some point.
Yeah.
As kids, we called on mom and daddy
or Ghostbusters
or. Who are you going to call?
Not a sponsor.
Ghostbusters, not a sponsor. And so, we've had to ask for help. As kids, if you couldn't reach something, you'd say, can you reach this for me, or and all of that. And as we grow up, it's like you said, it's like if we have to ask for help,
Mm-hmm.
you know, maybe it's where when we turn 18 or we move out on our own, we're like, I'm going to do this by myself.
Oh yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I've got to show them I can stand on my own 2 feet or whatever.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's where we begin that mindset of I can't ask for help.
Yeah, could be.
You know, I'm not sure, but I'm just grasping at straws again. You know, but at some point in life, we tend to develop it. And like Brother Mark said, we can only speak from a man's perspective.
Right. Have you ever played a woman in a Christmas play? Moment of truth and transparency.
I did say I was going to be transparent.
Pregnant woman?
No.
Just kidding. Bad joke.
Bad joke. I did not play a woman, but I did have to wear a woman's wig in one of the plays.
That's awkward.
I was supposed to be playing a hippie guy, and so I borrowed a wig, which was very awkward, to say the least. But yes, and so even though you and I are the only two in the room, it's just like the whole audience just went quiet.
Yeah, it was awkward.
It's like
I felt awkward on that one.
Yeah.
And I'm your audience.
And being it all, it was like a reddish colored wig.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was great.
That's awesome.
I had some curls going, man.
Cool.
But anyway, bad times. But we, you know, I've done lost my train of thought. That stinking wig, buddy, completely masked it all, man.
He'll get you.
That wig.
Yeah.
But anyway, you know, whatever age we come to, and like I said, it's not a weakness. We can only speak from the men's perspective, and you know, when we get out on our own, we get married, we have a family of our own. You know, it's common for us to want to manage our household and shoulder that load like Daddy did.
Sure.
You know what I mean? You know, Dad carried the finances. Dad, you know, he brought the money home, and he was the provider for the family. And you know, Mama took care of the house, and she took care of the family. And Mama had a horrible job. I mean, not a horrible job. I mean a very hard job. Is what I meant to say.
Right.
And so you know, they had a very difficult job, but the man, you know, we saw that in our fathers, him carrying that load. And so as we grow up and we become men, oftentimes we feel like if we don't carry that all on our own, then maybe we're failing at what we're doing. And and again, it can be spiritually, financially, physically, any of that.
Right.
And so basically this episode, I guess, is probably just more of an introduction into the next episode where we'll talk financial and physical.
Okay.
And so, you know, don't be afraid to say, I need some help.
Yep. Makes you human.
It makes you human. And we're all human. We all need help.
Except for aliens.
All the aliens are, they're surprisingly not human.
Yeah, good point.
And
carry on. Sorry. Or the dogs.
Or the dogs. Dogs.
Yeah.
Animals are not human.
Yeah.
Although there's humans claiming to be animals.
True.
True. Are they still human?
Speaking of, do you have litter box in this room? Okay, sorry.
Are you claiming to be a furry now?
Carry
Mark?
on. Carry.
Oh my God.
Go ahead. Sorry, I need help.
You admitted you need help. You need the litter box. But man, we never know where these episodes are going, folks. We try to come up with some scriptures. We come up with the titles and what we feel like would be great to talk about. But boy, when we start, we don't know where they're going, do we?
We'll go somewhere, and really, it takes a lot of help.
It does
to get there.
It really does. Oh my! But so this little intro here that we've done, I hope will make you realize just a little bit that there is help out there if you need it, and not to be afraid to ask for it, because there is help, there is hope. You know, I love that scripture that talks about we are not a people without hope.
Right.
And we're not. Christ, he said, ask anything in my name.
Right.
And so, you know, if you have a financial, a physical, we was in a service last night, and there wasn't very many people there, but there was some great needs there.
Sure.
And these folks, they was not afraid to step forward and say, hey, I need prayer for this, or I need prayer for that, or I have a son that is facing all these different medical issues.
Right.
And the doctors have told him they misdiagnosed him a time or two, and they've done this and they've done that, and now they don't even know how he's still alive, and he's on oxygen, and he's doing this, and I mean, horrible situations.
Yeah.
But they realized just how desperate they were, and so they came forward for prayer, and it didn't bother them to tell you the whole story if you wanted to hear it.
Sure. Well, those are people with life experience.
Yeah.
Some really good life experience, and just know that sometimes you just need to be open. Because really, man, if you don't know what somebody's need is, it's kind of hard to pray for them.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you're super spiritual, and
right.
And you can just have the spirit of discernment, and and if somebody is hungry and they immediately want vanilla milkshake.
Right.
Unless you got that level of discernment, sometimes most of the time you gotta have somebody, what are we even praying for?
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so a lot of people, myself included, would love to help people pray about things. But it does make it a lot easier if you kind of know about what you're praying about, not to be nosy or nothing, but that way you can just really send a formal petition, if you will.
Sure.
And
you don't have to go into, unless you're comfortable with this person.
Right.
And then you don't have to even go into grave detail.
Right.
You can just be like, okay, I'm praying tonight over my son's health. He's having some physical issues.
Right.
Or my family's in a financial situation.
Right.
God knows all about it.
Right.
That way you kind of have a little bit of an idea of what you're praying for, and which God knows all.
Right.
But it, like Brother Mark said, it does make it a little bit easier if you have a little bit of an idea,
right,
of what is it necessarily going to affect the outcome? Yeah, maybe not, but because God does know,
right?
But I think it makes it a whole lot easier for the person praying to relate,
right,
and to realize the sincerity and the seriousness of the situation.
Yeah.
And it helps them to maybe focus more time into that prayer.
Right.
And
I think it helps them a lot. Helps them a lot to remember what they're praying about after they eat their chicken sandwich.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because if somebody's like, hey, I just need prayer, I mean, for instance, a really good example, really good real world example, church prayer request time.
Yes.
And I have been there, I've tried to give, requests for different things, as the need arise. And, sometimes you can put words to things, and other times it's just so complicated and so heavy.
Absolutely.
You don't know where to start, and you just give an unspoken need. But the reality of it is, when I go to pray, I remember sometimes 2 or 3 of the unspoken needs and who had them, but I remember more of the verbal requests, like so-and-so's sick, or so-and-so's in the hospital, or so-and-so's son was in a car accident.
Yes.
But when you have more detail, it makes it a little easier to remember. And I think it's the same way if you go out to eat, like, after church, before, whatever, and you eat your chicken sandwich, if you have a little idea when you go home that night and you go to pray at bedtime, it makes it a little easier to remember.
Yes. That's very true. And a lot of times too, if you give a request out in church like that, a lot of times people can remember it, but like, you may not necessarily remember every request given in, but maybe if people see or hear your voice, sometimes that's what I'll do is, like, when I get down to pray, I'll like start in my mind back at the front seat on one side, and I'll be like, okay, who was it giving a request down through here? And even if you couldn't hear or couldn't remember that need, you could say, Lord, please remember their request. They gave it in, they're facing the need, whatever the need was, and that helps to trigger, a response to that too, of, okay, this sister needed prayer, or this brother needed prayer.
Right.
And so that, maybe that be something that would help. But, all in all, then there's other situations where there's people that may be in the hospital. Like, you know, it might be a sister of the church and her husband's in the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't give it out in request, or they don't tell somebody over the phone, or,
Right.
the church members may think, well, he just had to work tonight.
Right.
You know what
Sure.
I mean? And they're not praying for him because,
Sure. They just don't know.
necessarily because they don't know. They think everything's going well.
Right.
And, or just, Brother Sam wasn't here tonight or whatever,
Yeah.
And so, ask, give that in, ask for some prayer, ask for some help. And let's pull together. Let's pull this train together.
Sounds good to me, man.
Yeah, man. And so this was just an intro, basically, to some more of what we're going to be talking about here in this next episode. Talking about, Lord, I need some help. And so if you are someone out there that's needing some help, reach out to a brother or sister that you trust, or a pastor, or somebody that you can depend on to pray, that's going to take your need and your petition before God, and try to let them help you carry some of that load. And so until next week, may God bless you. Thank you again for tuning in, for stopping by and sitting a spell with us, and may God bless you, and let's keep on making it count. Well,